Alrighty, good afternoon, everyone. This is the Blue Horseshoe Club podcast, episode 4. I'm your host, Rodin, and we'll go ahead and get started with our podcast today and some market talks. Joined today by Caleb Aranya and Dirk McGurk. Some quick intros here. So Caleb runs the SEC Lounge, running basically big time market items out there, big time market funds out there in the wild. And you got Mr. Dirk McGurk here. If you don't know him, that's crazy. That's crazy why you don't know him. And Dirk is everywhere.
Yeah, I gotta stop that.
right.
Yeah. Currently, I think he's running around in a PL uniform. Yeah, I'm a member of Sniggeredly in PL.
Nice.
I should probably go shoot some more things out. the last few days have been busy with this side job.
Yeah.
As a writer, journalist, and pundit, trying to talk the masses down a little bit, or at least talk some sense into them. It's not like it's been extremely successful, but I'm not trying to talk sense into anybody. You know what I mean? It's like I enjoy discussing these things and talking with people about them. And I don't know. I mean, when things happen, we talk about them. Just this week was, the last couple of weeks have been week really busy.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that happened. You know what I mean? A lot of it is like just out of the blue. Like it's one of those Jackie Chan what memes CCP. You know what I mean? It's like why CCP? Why?
Yeah, if we want to do a little bit of a recap, right? It's actually been going on for what? It's actually 2 weeks now, right, Dirk? It started not this week, but last week with the first small steps and the first announcement of what was actually going to be rolled out. Well, I mean, you had the change to excavators, the third nerf to excavators. And then, of course, the change to the depletion mechanic and spawn rates of mining belts. And that was actually the only topic. That was actually the only one for a good bit there. And then I guess it was last Friday. I guess it was on the 9th, I think it was, that they released this thing about changes to fighters related to PvE and also PvP. And saying that it was going to be coming on that following Tuesday, so the Tuesday of this week past. Yeah, you coined the term. It was the hold my beer nerfing, right? It's like every single time that the people had just gotten used to, okay, this is a change. We are trying to figure out if we're mad, sad, or glad, right? And then it was next post and hold my beer and hold my beer. It's like, seriously? And then it was patch day, and then it was all the other content that might not have been commented on yet. And people were just being overloaded with information. And I think that also ties a lot into why we're seeing this extreme response, right? Well, yeah. So, like I said, on Friday, they released this and saying it was coming out Tuesday, right? That didn't leave a whole lot of time for people out there to provide feedback. But feedback they did get. To the point where on Monday, the day before patch day, the day before the release was coming out, they actually nerfed back their nerf, right? They did what I'll call a halvesies on it. They got rid of some elements, reduced others, and then put that through on Tuesday. Players were still kind of in in debate mode over that. You had Quant, put out a response on Reddit, which was kind of another hold my beer sort of moment in a way. But then you had this other stuff related to ghost training and pacifier gate that popped up both on the same day, and it was like, boom! Now we're into kind of a different phase. We're into a phase where it's not just about a change to the game, right? Here's something that only affects certain players. We're into something else that people are outraged over, and in some cases, rightfully so. That has now taken it to kind of a new level. Yeah, and I think then after the Quant incident and after all that back and forth and all the drama and all the memes,
then we got, of course, we got the meta show comments and talking it down a little bit, and then just after that, we got more drama, and then we got this thing coming up with the ghost training, and then more drama. And it's like we've been consistently trying to stop the flow of what I call mediocre communication things from CCP. If they had done this in, say, the classical way, right, the old way with the old patches that were quite considerable, and there was only one a year, right? Named and with all the details in advance, and some of them, or the minutiae came out on the day, right? When the patch notes were officially released, everyone could sit down, look at it, read through them, analyze them, decide what to feel about them. This has been so different the last, is it 2 years now that the cadence has changed?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
Which means that you're getting these like 3, 4 separate parts for each original big patch, which is just causing confusion and more debate and discussion and rage than I think there was in the past.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to say up front here, since we are kind of off on this topic, I want to say it up front here because I've talked about, I've kind of talked about this stuff last night on Open Comms, today on Talking in Stations, and and now here. And what I tend to do is I tend to like get it in like kind of at the end when I remember it, and I want to remember it first. And that is, I don't think that what's going on here needs to be as kind of harsh or argumentative or all that kind of stuff as what it may seem when actually talking about these issues. Okay. I'm not blaming CCP as like, you dirty, rotten scoundrels or anything like that, because what I want to see happen from this is that this doesn't turn into something like a Summer of Rage, that there aren't communication missteps that perhaps make it worse or things like that. Right. So I don't think it's as bad as the Summer of Rage by any means, but then again, I don't know that if on the 5th day of the Summer of Rage we necessarily thought that either. Yeah, I hope that what happens here is that we can get a resolution, that there's not another shoe that drops in a few days that just gets these people all charged up, because even these issues that are being discussed, they are not they're not life altering. They're not game altering for Eve, right? But they are things that are on top of what I think is a bit of an undercurrent of dissatisfaction in some places out there, namely nullsec, and that is because of how long it is taking for them to get these changes to nullsec that began really in 2014, October of 2014, I think it was, with the Phoebe jump drive changes, went through FuzzySov, and now we're in this really long rollout of structures that doesn't feel like it has an end in sight.
And it's kind of related to what I know that you and I have been talking about a few times, the fact that all of these things have not been looked at in a historical perspective and in a more numbers-based perspective. If you start looking at all the factors, I think you got into some of it in the article that you wrote, but some of the things like how many players are actively playing Eve, how is the game progressing, what features are brought in what order. So when people are criticizing FuzzySov and saying that FuzzySov is to blame for all this, yeah, but if you roll back and you look at the beginning of FuzzySov, what it was supposed to do, and then you start adding all the other points, like you mentioned the jump drive changes, then you have the anomaly boost, you have all these things added to the mix, right? Including, of course, ship changes and balance changes in general. When you start having all these things in unison with that FuzzySov system, suddenly it breaks down, because if you have these infinite easy access faucets, infinity everywhere with the new industry design, then you get structures with even more infinity design, then the whole thing breaks down, because then what they added last was, of course, alphas, which then removes the limitation on skill points. So you have no bottlenecks, no scarcity, no limitations left. at all, and then you have a sovereignty system that is so boring that no one actually wants to fight over it, right? And there's no incentive to do it. So you have a perfect storm in
that
the
right
game.
there. And that right there is one of the biggest things that is driving a number of issues I think that people have, right? Is the fact that nobody wants to do it. There's got to be a reason other than, well, I suppose we can get down to a low level and say it's a video game. People go out and shoot stuff, but really it's a time commitment to something that really results in people having to have a good reason to go spend that time doing that thing, and they don't want to do it. They really don't want to mess with the whole Fozzie-Sob thing.
Yeah, and if there's enough roids for everyone in a belt, why would you shoot your neighbor? Why not leave him alone and let him suck on his roid? And that's pretty much what you have in an extremely upscaled version, right? Everyone is just getting their free SP. Everyone is just getting their free resources, their free titans, their free everything. And they don't need to bother with what the neighbor is doing until they go, ooh, now I'm bored. I need good fights. They've basically changed a contesting and PvP game into a Skinner box where the player is supposed to sit there and pick at roids or pick at rats or pick at whatever. And then in one of these cases with the recent changes, basically what the psychology tester has done is taken away the button of that was being pegged, right? Or at least moved it. And now the players are just going crazy and getting the whole pacing mind game thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty strange. Like this is the first time I've experienced the game so calm. You know what I mean? With as many
it's
players.
Stale.
Yeah.
Use the right word. It's stale. It's
No,
not even
you're
calm.
right. You're right.
Look, it depends on where you are. I mean, in some places, down in the South, there's more activity. I mean, with what PL and NC are doing down there, and Test and CVA and whatnot. I mean, there is stuff going on out there, but what there kind of is not going on. Like you may have people that that are finding ways to make conflict happen or whatever, but you don't really have conquest, right? There's nobody that's trying to contest sovereignty out there and take somebody's space on any form of scale, mainly because there's not a good reason to do that.
And those activities do not really spill over in the same way that I claim that they used to do in the past. If there was anything activity-wise happening anywhere, it usually had some sort of spillover effect to the rest of the game, whether it was because it left a defense vacuum somewhere or because it actually created a lot of sinks of assets that needed to be replaced. But when everything is just easy mode and isolated, and the best example recently was when I was informed of some of the numbers of prices in Delve, right? Especially on things like minerals that have been exploding in high sec because it's not really getting in there. But the prices in Delve are ridiculously low. I think they said that titanium is down at around below 3 ISK per unit, while in high sec it's exploding above 5. It's like, I don't know what the prices are down there because it doesn't actually spill over. It doesn't have any real collateral effect.
So, I mean, have we gotten ourselves to a point where it's just the people with the stuff has just gotten so big where you can't really invade them anymore? The only thing you can really do is just either join them or join their enemies. There's no more toppling the king. I don't think so. You know what I mean? There's just no reason to, or the ability to do it is incredibly cumbersome. It takes not so much the ISK, maybe not the ISK, but it takes way too much time and effort. As far as money, I mean, people are making money out there. It's easy to come up with funds to start conflicts, but the mechanics behind successfully taking over a region or a constellation or a system, or even just a single structure, looking at you, Citadels, is way too cumbersome.
Yeah, but all these things kind of tie back to the same problems that CCP has been ignoring for at least now 7 years. In the past, they could live off of the design that they already have because they hadn't messed with it too much. But things like, I keep mentioning these small things that are related to market stuff, and I keep getting the same reply. Either the game is not mature enough for it when we talk about things like shares, or not enough people are going to use it when I talk about things like player-to-player billing or business-to-business bills inside the game, right? And it's as if no one in CCP actually understands how real-world economy and business works, which is kind of ironic because they kind of run one. But these things are important to build anything of the scale that Eve is supposed to. It's why you're seeing that you have all these internal markets, right? And things like a thriving economy and anyone using something like the shares system for anything serious has not actually emerged. There's been a few attempts, but it's never really kicked off. And then it ends up in scams because just like in real life, it's all based on trust, right? And then the Care Bears start whining about protect us, CCP. You have to make sure that you can't scam. Well, there's not a lot of oversight and protection like that in the real world, except for the criminal justice system, right, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, but I don't necessarily know how. I don't necessarily know how some of those things would work to fix anything with with what we were talking about in terms of generating conflict and content and things like that. I understand how it could make Eve I don't know, more fleshed out in some ways, but not necessarily how it would contribute to, I don't know, making people want to go shoot each other and contest space and things like that.
No, but I think what I'm trying to say is that in order to be disruptive or a new contester, right? A new challenger appears, right? If you want to do that, you might need a leg up, right? And if you need that leg up, you might need to find the right collaborators. You need to maybe get some funding. Now we don't have casino money that can just be thrown in your face infinitely. So now you have to work a little bit harder to get those things. So if you want to build a keep star and you're not able to do the darkness is printing or the delve resource sucking, you need to do it in a slower way, right? You need, the barrier of entry has grown to a point where if you do not have an organization the size of at least 500 or 1,000 people, you're not really going to be able to come in and play. And I don't think that the game was designed for that level of entry barrier.
Well, it's they always talk about small groups and things like that, right? I mean, the fact of the matter is that sovereign nullsec, you use all the tools at your disposal, and we know that one of the best tools in the game is just raw numbers. We know that that's kind of the way it goes, and some groups out there have played to that, and other ones don't. I don't know.
To mention an example, right now, I'm just for a second going to take us back in history a little bit. In order to compete with big entities, right, with very big and powerful blocks and groups, you need some sort of novelty, a new approach, a business idea that is different than anything else. Back in the day when the Tech 2 was introduced and launched, of course, every big group was sucking on the research agents and increasing their chance to actually get the lotteries and get those BPOs. And of course, they got a nice number of those. Smaller entities or individuals that did something similar ended up with assets that they couldn't really use, because to utilize something like Tech 2 in the early days were very difficult and time consuming, sourcing the materials and all that stuff. So back then, me and a couple of people decided to try to do a trust-based system where we basically collected everyone's BPOs on a trust basis, and we then produced everything and paid them out part of the profit. A very primitive version of what I would have said, this should have been done like a shares-based system from day one. It's just, if the tools are not there in the client to make some of these things or support them, it's very much uphill to design this. And eventually we also ended up having way too many overheads on management. But it did actually create a lot of profit, and it did actually become the thing that funded the whole Big Blue adventure that Celine was part of, with MC actually protecting it until it, of course, failed miserably. But the point is that if you don't make those small facilitating tools, you will not be able to get this disruptive emergent gameplay.
Yeah, but at the same time, though, right? Like the folks who can work outside of the mechanics, outside of the confines of the client, tends to be the one that becomes really, really successful. You know, the folks who come up with out-of-game tools to help manage their large groups, or tools to help manage assets or fleet-based assistance or what have you, right? So in a way, it's kind of like, yeah, it sucks that we don't have the tools, and it sucks that we can't interact with it in game. But if you want to get better at that particular, attribute, you'll find a way to get better at it, and oftentimes it means thinking outside of the box, like literally thinking and doing things outside the box.
And it's about competition. It's about putting in those strains, scarcities, bottlenecks in a way that can create emergent gameplay from a meta level where who's actually fighting who can actually cause ripple effects, and then opportunities will open. But if you do not have the support, the point is that CCP keeps trying to lower the barrier of entry, but they are lowering it in the wrong way. They're lowering it where it benefits very big organizations. One of the things that we know is that to do some of these complicated things, your SRP projects, making assets and liquids available for new projects and stuff like that. This is something that's already working internally in those big groups. If someone in PL needs X amount of billions to start a project, they can just post on the forum and they get it instantly. Everyone else needs to do this ground up, right? And if you're starting out with saying, I want to build a new corporation, that's an extremely high barrier of entry. You cannot make all these tools or get access to all these networks easily. So they should lower those tools instead, right?
Well, I mean, I don't want to quote Malcanis's law here, but I mean, the fact is that anything that you put in, right, that will benefit smaller entities, like you're saying, will also benefit the larger entities as well. Everybody has the ability to take advantage of those things.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing about how to build these cultures and these tools, and CCP keeps ending up giving, well, I wouldn't say bad tools, because they have iterated on things, including things for the markets. They've just never actually pushed what I call the old vision of a capitalist game, right? That's not what you're seeing. On the contrary, I'd say you're seeing a socialist game developing.
I mean, as far as markets and stuff like that, I mean, from a MMO perspective, like E is it, right? Would it be different if we still had Dr. E? I don't know.
If we still had what?
Dr. AO.
Yeah.
Oh, Dr. E, yeah.
So, I mean, does it really help CCP from a business standpoint to really expand on market stuff when already, as a matter of fact, we kind of do that on our own already? As long as we have the API for it, we can build the tools, right? And a lot of the stuff we do as far as markets, it happens in really small groups, really small but powerful.
But can we really, right? Can we really do what you're saying? Can I make a share that does not hold a voting right?
You have to think out of game, man. That's the sucky part. You have to do it out of
game.
Yeah,
but if I think out of game, then I have to build a platform that somehow virtualizes these mechanical shares that are already in the game, and then it's still going to be a lot of bad risk-based systems, right? What if the person that is the third party holding these things gets hit by bus? You end up in these things that would never kick off from a business plan perspective.
Well, I mean, from CCP's development side, right? I mean, obviously they've got finite resources, right, that they can deploy to any of these things, and they've got to make the determination of what they think is going to give the most benefit as far as retaining and or growing the player base. I don't know that as much as we would like some of these things, I don't know that they necessarily, push that needle out, far enough for them to take this person working off of this and put it over here, or hire somebody new to be able to do it, right?
No, but if you consider something that's actually very relevant to some of these things we're talking about, Hex was trying to start up a player-driven insurance system since forever. It was his little pet dream, and that's all good and fine. And people have very different things that they want to try and do in EVE, except he was basically forced to compete with an NPC sanctioned system, right? A system that is so poorly designed that it's also being abused excessively, right? Again and again, you get the insurance scams where people are using it to print money from assets because they don't want to actually partake and use the market, which ties back to the whole thing of all the things that are missing and wrong about the market. But that's an even longer story. The point is that insurance is one of those things that CCP should have considered finding a way to hand over to the players a long time ago. And this is a general thing about all the services in EVE, that they should have focused on how can we get this to be a player versus player system instead of a player versus environment system.
It's gonna take someone to really break that side of the game for CCP to really take notice of it. I mean, yeah. I work in a really small scale, and it feels really broken how much IS can influence I can wield in my little area, and I'm just one guy. I'm just one low sex scumbag. I can only imagine what it's like for legit large entities. You know what I mean? I think it's gonna take some like in-game, one of those CCP moments where like, man, I didn't know the players could do that.
Well, back in the day, we used to have these strange free-form contracts, and contracts have always been a little bit primitive, and I think they've had 2 iterations throughout the entire history of EVE, and then of course recently when we got structures, when they had to actually go into the belly of the beast and try fixing things again. But the freeform things in the past is one of those things that if they had kept thinking it along those lines and how they could make it better for players to make their own types of contracts, whether it was I know that Dirk has this thing with the futures contracts, or whether it was contracts like collateralized loans, or whether it was things like an insurance thing. All the types of services that you had kind of available to some extent in NPC services, this should have been handed over to players, right? That means that if that had matured, CCP could have said, okay, now players are running all these things. They have all that control of say the insurance market. We can just pull out the NPC version. We don't need it anymore.
Well, one of the things too we probably need to consider is like the expertise just may not be there, and they're afraid to mess with it because they're afraid to adjust levers in that part of the game because it's much more. I think it's much more connected than say adjusting loot drops or adjusting anomaly rates or bounties or something like that. Like market ripples go really really far.
Yeah, of course, it's not necessarily as easy, but if they want to see the more mature and complicated things in the economy, we need to get out of this feudal system, right? We have a feudal or a communistic economy in EVE right now. Everything is fixed priced. Everything is flat based on what the NPC design capacity can hold. And the things that should be something that we competed in, like let's say offering public slots for industry, this is all nerfed by the fact that it's an infinite resource anywhere, both in structures and in NPC stations. So there's no way of having any competition at all.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's like, I'll be honest, like from where I'm sitting, I'm not anticipating CCP to do anything, to be honest, because I think they're afraid to do it. I think they're legitimately, they don't want to mess with markets.
Well, I think it's also not necessarily in their wheelhouse, to be quite honest. I mean, yeah, I don't know that they kind of have a group there that can necessarily think in that direction, and develop in that direction. And again, it comes back to the thing of, and what does spending those development resources do for us, with the game? I mean,
it sells the unique selling point, right? Okay, I know that everyone likes to talk about blowing ships up in space, but the really unique selling point in EVE is still the fact that there's an ecosystem that's tied into the most complicated financial simulator in the world. And this is what sells to a lot of new players when they see these things like stories on Financial Times or the big scams, the big banks, projects of a scale that makes huge headlines, right? Of course, BTEC-R and fights like that bring a lot of attention as well. But it's really the unique, strange things about the EVE market. And this is something that ties back to one of the first things that caught me when I opened the EVE market is the fact that they have an exchange-based trading system. No other game has copied this yet. And I find it almost ironic that the thing that makes the EVE economy kind of balanced, and it's actually the only thing, is the exchange-based market. The fact that it's player-driven. No other game has been able to do that. And if they don't keep banking on that aspect, eventually someone is going to make a better MMO. Of course, it's not going to have the history. It's not going to have the community. But it will most likely start drip feeding players out of EVE, because I haven't seen the next thing in EVE. It was what I was hoping for in around the Summer of Rage, just to go back to what is actually on the agenda these days. That was the vision that we were hoping for. All this new stuff, all these new possibilities, walking in stations, socializing in a whole new way. And we just didn't get it, because then people got pissed and started shooting a monument and made drama instead of being constructive and trying to say, well, what is actually wrong here is this, 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 and this. And that the player base can't tell the difference between a question mark and an exclamation mark. That just nails it. That's the whole problem.
Yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong. Okay, I would like to see a broadening out of things related to the market of this game, because I think that it has the potential to do that. Right? I'm not holding my breath. Is what is kind of what I'm saying. Especially maybe not right now. Where we're sitting here at the beginning of this show talking about what's going on out there and how much it's driving some dissatisfaction within the player base, right? I don't see CCP. I don't see CCP. Somehow pivoting to it. It would be nice, but not hold my breath.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna have to challenge that, especially in today's, alpha account environment. If the market is enough of a unique selling point, or have people shifted to a more casual-minded mindset now that we are free to play? I just don't think the market draws people as much as it used to. Or even if it truly did, if you were to actually break down the numbers, as far as if you were to do a survey, hey, what brought you into the game? What's the thing that really caught your imagination going into the game? I don't think market is it, to be honest.
Yeah, like if you had a 10-point kind of survey, right, of which do you think needs the most attention?
Yeah.
Where would you like to see stuff added? I mean, and then hand it out, and we're able to actually get all of the players of this game to answer it. I just don't know where the market is interesting. I think the fact that the scope of this EVE world, including the market, within that, is very attractive to the types of players that want to be in this game. But if you had to have them choose, where would the players be on that? I think it would probably be a minority who are like, spend whatever and really juice up the market stuff.
No, but it ties back to what you said earlier today. Now, of course, I've been following you around the shows because you've been doing the rounds. But one of the things you said when someone brought up the idea of making a financial council or something focus group based about the economy, and someone was saying,
Council of Economic Advisors.
Yeah, and it should be democratically elected. And you said, well, if it's democratically elected, it's not going to fucking work. This is the same thing, right? This is not about public opinion. To fix things like the market, these people don't necessarily know or understand that where the stuff is coming from. They just use the multi-buy or drop everything to buy orders. They don't care who's actually doing it. It's just like in the real world. If you ask people coming out from the voting booth, so do you think our focus in this period of the presidency should be to fix the banking sector? No one would fucking say that, right? Even though this is what has caused the majority of the issues that we're in right now. I know that I was getting a little bit political and we're supposed to not do that, but most people don't know what fractional reserve banking is. They don't know about future swaps. They don't know about how the academic math guys and computers have created this high frequency trading problem and futures shit. All of that has just made this mess of the real life economics, right? And we have similar things in Eve. It's just the other way. It's going the exact opposite direction, really, the problems we have in Eve.
I'm just laughing at what Akulu wrote there. He's like, we could vote with our wallets. The richer you are, the more votes you get. That's the way it should be.
I'd have a fraction of a vote.
I think I should say welcome to Eric that's actually joined us in audio. And we tend to have an open mic policy if you really have something interesting to say. So if anyone is out there that actually wants to join this discussion, feel free to drop in and I will add you.
Yep. Plenty of room. I mean, as far as I mean, we'll see, man. Well, I'm not sure what that, what kind of critical mass would have to be, or what kind of great hidden exploit would need to be revealed in order for CCP to do anything.
Hey, Marsha. Okay, the point I'm making is, and I was talking to Quant about this at FanFest, right, is try to at least go in and look at some of the low-hanging fruit. And I know there's all this argument of endless legacy code, but something like adding a contract type, he was talking about offering that thing, and I think people read the dev blog about adding something like collateralized loan contracts. This is kind of easy to do, and it would maybe make groups like the Market Discussion Forum and the SEC Lounge people that I kind of play around with every day able to focus on the next thing, the tier up from that. And it's the same with if we had a little bit of features added to something like the share system, maybe we could add the next level of things and services in Eve. Recently, I started the SEC Mutual Fund, basically to have a place for all players to park all their money when they go on rage breaks or have kids or stuff like that. And it's set to end up at a market cap of 1 trillion. And I've already filled it to about 600 billion. And yesterday, Elizabeth Norn created a bond of a similar size, also 1 trillion, and also almost filled to the range of 600 billion. It's not that there's not enough opportunities around. It's just that there is no motivation to create a new business plan. And every single day, someone is talking to me about new ideas or businesses they want to start, or they want to put up a structure out in Null, and they're saving up money. And I keep saying, well, have you considered doing it like this? How about writing down a business plan? Have you considered actually crunching the numbers? And people are just not familiar with this or used to it. And this is some of the things that I talk to Marsha about a lot, because she's kind of from an accounting background. It's like, if we don't get this culture nurtured, it's not going to emerge. It's going to die in the womb. It's died in the womb 3 times when it comes to meta markets and MD.
Yes, it has. And now that I'm here, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. You're perfect.
So I wanted to just go back to that point you made about creating like a group of people who advocate for markets. And I've been thinking about this for a while, because I was thinking about it when Rick's kicked off over people who produce creative content and they struggle to get anywhere with CCP. They're always fighting with them. over what can they license, what can't they. And I remember thinking months ago, we need a creative council of people who are creatives, who do artwork, who want to do T-shirts, and they need to get together, bicker with each other. They need somebody to sort of moderate it. But basically, they need a forum, a mini forum. And I think that's true of MD people as well. And what you also mentioned last week about streamers, they're a different group as well. They're a different type of content creator. And there's kind of scope for this. And when focus groups were first proposed, which I think...
Wasn't it Sion?
Well, it was Sion, and I asked the question of him because he'd proposed it. He'd taken it to CCP and they rejected it. And he was in the middle of a bit of a wrangle with CCP. But I said to him, but why don't you just do it anyway? They can't stop you. You're a player, you know, like you've got enough influence to get people in there. Just fucking do it. And he kind of listened. But then CCP went out and created their focus groups, which were not that good. Because if you read the chat logs of some of the focus groups, they were not that good. I think the Citadel channel in Slack was a focus group, but I think it was public. And I think it was self-moderated. And I think as it evolves, people need to step in and say, right, I will take ownership of this project. I will work with various people and I will create a group of people who are interested in this topic. And together we can leverage our discussions and our influence to get change implemented. You're not electing these people. They'll do it and they'll argue with each other and the arguments will float to the top. So, like, for the creatives on the Twitch side and YouTube, that would work. For the MD people, that would work. It just needs people to step up and say, I'm going to create this area right now. I'm going to invite people in. I'm going to go through and filter out the people who are trouble causers and moderate. And then we're going to write up proposals and pitch them at the CSM and at CCP. I think that might work.
Well, what I do want to say is that the reference to the Council of Economic Advisors was not necessarily about pitching market ideas or anything like that, right? It was because of conversations that were related to things like the mining changes and things like the ratting changes to fighters or the changes to fighters that were being targeted at the thing, right? Looking at the environment. Well, if CCP doesn't have a good handle on the interaction of the underpinnings of the environment, right, then they're always going to go towards, well, let's nerf the ship, right? That maybe what they need is, something where there's also kind of a view towards the economics of the game and the environment, that's underneath, that you don't really get by just electing people to the CSM.
Yeah, and I have to keep making the joke about what CCP needs right now is someone teaching them about Locke de Volterra equations, and they need someone to teach them about negative feedback systems. And I'm sure that there's a lot of females in CCP right now that can explain the simplest form of that, which is the menstruation cycle. So this is not rocket science, right? It's just someone needs to fucking teach them and stop messing with stuff they don't understand and making everything based on linear and exponential systems, because you can't control them. By definition, they run amok and they overshoot, but there is not enough destruction or motivation for the predators. So what we have now is we have a savannah filled with fucking lions and no zebras.
Well, the argument that I keep hearing is we keep referring to CCP as they're doing this, they're doing that, they're not listening. They've ignored this aspect of the market for too long, and I agree. But I think there are enough people who are committed and would put that effort in. They perhaps need to do it. Caleb, you could do it. You could set up an open focus group and say, right, we're going to set up a focus group for the market for people from MD. Everybody is welcome, and then you could gradually go through and filter out people who are trouble causers, who are, irritating in channel and are not really contributing, and then get them to do write-ups of specific systems, say once a month, and submit it to a CSM like Arif, who might actually listen, who can advocate for it with CCP. I think because we've moved from a forum-based system, like MD used to be a big forum, people looked at devs posted on it and said, I've just read something that I've never seen before. You've educated me about economics. But the forums are dying, and
they might be revived.
The platforms are changing.
Because the current Reddit drama and the fact that Slack is moderated by a small group, all these things might actually mean that the new forums and the new policy from CCP to stop posting things in things and communities they don't control might actually bring the activity back to the Evo with a new forum design, with new features, and hopefully with the opportunity to create, I don't know, group-based things like the focus group forums that are player-made and invite only, or at least invite only to post. Things like that. Self-moderation, that was something that we had been promised in these forums when they launched. We never got it. We got the alternative, which was basically linked to the Eve Gate thing, where we had forums that were internally for corporations. But that's not what we needed. We needed the ability to actually self-moderate our own, not necessarily our own public posts, but at least when we make groups and communities that are then self-moderated. Because the moderation thing, you can't really moderate groups of the size of an MMO. This has been proven again and again. It needs to be self-moderated.
But I think there's an emphasis too much here on saying, why have you not done this for us at CCP? And why can't we just do it for ourselves? There are people here that can do it. And instead of sort of like sitting on, because it feels like malaise to me that there's this kind of defeatist attitude at the moment from players towards CCP. Why haven't you done this? Why haven't you done that? Why is this taking so long? You need to acknowledge that they took a massive staff cutting hit. And
oh yeah, of course.
It's never been plugged.
But something came up today in the meta show that I kind of agree with. When you formulate things to CCP, if you formulate it as a request, it doesn't tend to actually work. I think it was Asher that said this, that you have to point out that there's a problem, and then and then you have to give an idea of solutions, areas that they should focus on or consider, but not an actual final solution. Right?
That's absolutely typical. I actually said this in an interview about 3 weeks ago. When you're dealing with IT, if you go to them and say, this is a problem, this is my solution, they instantly get uppity about it because you're telling them how to fix it. And they're like, well, actually, the development cost of that is too much and it's not viable. But if what you actually have to do is delineate the problem properly, give them chance to make a solution, and then haggle. And a lot of people don't realise that.
I think the CCP's major malfunction right now is that they are on so many years of short-term thinking. They're basically only doing short positions and no long positions, because the features and the designs and the patches are very much focused on just the next 3 months or the next 6 months. They're not based on something that's going to be persistent and forever. Interestingly enough, all the things that make Eve work are the things that were designed at inception. It's the exchange-based market system. It's things like corps. It's the character sheets. It's the time-based training. It's all these fundamentals that were in there from the beginning. That's why Eve survives. Why it is struggling is because they keep doing short-term fixes. They don't bring in features that will last longer. Well, structures
to be fair, they are currently in the middle of something that is going to be long-lasting and is taking a long time.
Yeah, I've said that many times. The new pipe and the Seagull project definitely looks like it's going back to the roots of designing new things that can actually last longer. So I will give them that. It's just that I don't understand why they keep saying, well, we can't dedicate developer hours to add something like player-to-player bills and corporation-to-corporation bills, something that would ease life for everyone. I'm not saying that it's easy to make, because I don't really know exactly how easy it is to make. I just know that fundamentally a lot of these things are already in the client, because you get a bill from the NPCs when you rent an office. Why is it so difficult to add exactly the same option for a player-to-player system? That could be used for subscription-based services, It could be used for rental services. It could be used for whatever, anything market and business based, right? It's the fundamentals of business. Sending someone an invoice. Do you accept it? No. Then it just goes in the pile, and on the person that sent it, it goes as a debtor, right? This is not rocket science.
Right.
Well, you want me to answer that one for you, Caleb?
Oh yes, please, Eric, please do.
So, and the reason why they're saying I can't spend any dev time on it, right, is when you look at how IT functions within organizations, right? And I fight this battle every single day because everybody comes to me, I want these 18 things, and I say it's not on my priority list, and I don't have money to designate to spending 4 days to research your project and 2 days to write it, right? I have to account for that. And CCP is saying the same thing. What they don't have is a team that perhaps you can cycle these through that is funded to fix these things, right? I think we had it for a while, right? And I think they've gotten away from it. I don't know that they have the dev team they need to run this game, to be honest with you.
Do you think that for voluntary focus groups on specific niche areas that might be getting overlooked would work? Because in theory, they'd go in as volunteers and they'd discuss with each other, bicker, and then start hammering out details. And then when they've got something viable to propose it. Effectively, they would be working for free. But that might be viable, I think.
Well, I mean, you can do that, but who's going to code it, right? You still have to get the funding and approval to do the project.
Right. But you're making a good pitch if you've hammered out the details beforehand and you've got something viable to propose. Which I think is the problem at the moment, is the ideas that pop up on forums and Reddit and comments that you see in Twitch streams, remarks that people are making, articles they write, they're very unfiltered. They haven't had enough discussion, enough debate. They haven't been unpicked, and there's no consensus from the players. So it's like, it's usually...
Well, there's never consensus from the players.
No, but I don't know, because actually the focus groups, if they were managed properly, they do achieve a sort of consensus.
But it's also streamlining things, right? Like, for a long time, we've had that bottleneck with the Alliance logos, right? It's been an endless uphill thing where people can't actually submit their logos and get them added to the server. But they have time to make new models and skin new ships and do all these things, but they can't figure out how to set up a procedure that's easy to check and add to the servers. How is it that I'm pretty sure that most groups and alliances are more focused on getting their alliance logo into the game than getting new skins?
Yeah,
well,
I just want to go back to something that Eric said before about devs and the allocation of resources and things like that, right? There is an element here, I think, okay, that when CCP began this game, when they began this journey to create EVE Online, right? I don't know that they ever thought we'd be here today, you know.
No, they did. I don't think they thought 15 years in the future.
Like, you know, to where what we're really talking about here, okay, you know, is a vast kind of expansion of, it's more than a game. It's this big giant simulator. And how do you code a world simulator?
And the point is that every time someone then argues about the things that you need to code to make a world simulator, a lot of the player base say, but it's just a game, it's supposed to be fun. Yeah, but fun doesn't last if everyone has a ball playing football. Then there's going to be 11 balls in one goal and 11 balls in the other goal, and no one won.
Yeah, but that's something to probably be addressed, right? I mean, eventually the gamer culture shifts, right? To, like, right now, I think it's super casual out there right now in the market. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but my question is, should they be playing EVE?
Because it's free. Hell yeah, they'll play it.
No, but seriously, a casual-based player base, right? Someone that's not used to consequence, someone that's not used to risk, someone that's not used to hardcore PvP or hardcore ecosystem and all these things, not used to simulation. We're basically saying that people that play checkers we should cater to them when we're at chess club. That makes no fucking sense.
Well, yeah, and I just want to address something that Akulu said out there. He said it could be argued that EVE is in maintenance mode as far as CCP is concerned. Look, That's been said for years. Okay, EVE Online is the cash cow. Growth has been, well, negative.
Flatline.
I mean, as far as subscribers and things like that, right? While I think that they have found some ways of of increasing growth through microtransactions and things like that, this is a late stage cash cow business as far as CCP as a company is probably concerned, right? I don't know that they necessarily have the mindset of they are developing it for the next decade. It may be here a decade from now, but I don't know that they're thinking that they're developing for this thing that will somehow live forever.
Well, I do get the feeling that the whole standby mode, I keep calling this a period where we're doing a double bypass, and that the API is the tool that CCP is using to make it possible to create EVE 2.0 on the fly, right? Structures is the thing that really got me back in EVE, because I could see that now it looked as if there was something happening. Then they started ripping out body parts, like ripping out the in-game browser, ripping out the EVE wiki, and just removing things that I thought were supposed to be there like forever. And a lot of services and features are moved out with the API. I don't know what the end of that will be, but it could potentially make it possible for CCP to change fundamental code, like removing post code entirely, maybe revamping the entire contract and market system, and then using things like the new refinery and mining, and maybe a new asteroid-based mining system to get rid of all the old stuff, right? So basically you would see EVE 2.0, maybe not next year, but maybe the year after.
Do you not think it's going on a little bit too long? Like 2011, we were told that there would be no development on space stuff for 18 months. Then they stretched it out to like 3 years, and we were like, right, that's it, tantrum. And they gave us a road plan of 3 years, and we're 4.5 years into it, and we're not even a quarter through the number of structures that need to be replaced. I don't think they're in sort of like maintenance mode. They've grossly underestimated the time it would take to implement, and it's not working.
Yeah, and I think the main problem with that is that the implementation order and balance is mismanaged, because it doesn't motivate new players, which is actually what it should have done. So you got more players, more money, more devs, faster implementation. But because they have not rolled it out the right way, and only now start looking at things like balance and things that could actually create content, then they're not getting the numbers that they needed. Without the fundamental core changes, alphas is a waste of time. It's just going to bring in a lot of people for fuck you fleets, and then people are going to get bored, and then they're going to fuck off on breaks again.
Well, I think you're right there, Caleb. I think Alpha Clones is a big bust, and I said it would be, but I think it is. Now, is it true that I've heard that the art department is now larger than the dev department? The guys making the skins. Is that true, you guys?
I don't know exactly the size of it.
Is no larger than the dev department? The actual programmers. I would think that the art department would probably be smaller than the developer department, wouldn't it?
I thought I heard rumor that there were more in the art department staff than the dev staff.
They have lots of artists. Lots.
It is, because it is actually very art demanding, right? From concept art to asset art, and especially when we're starting looking at things like Valkyrie and Gunjack and Spark and all these things. So, but that's true in most other games, right? That the art departments are extremely huge. If you look at things like Square Enix games, the art department is crazy big. And yes, I do actually think that they are bigger than the dev department. I think it's becoming standard in games because they are so demanding.
Well, it's just, I mean, it's just a different form of development, though, right? I mean, it's
it's a different. It depends. Are they developing skins or are they developing prep for the game? Like skins is income, right?
Yeah.
And the sad part is that because of the Summer of Rage, all of those artists are not actually as capable of making revenue for the company as they should have been. If we had had anything remotely like Incarna, if we had something right now like brand unification where I could spend real life money or Plex on buying actual clothing or I don't know, furniture or crazy stuff like that. I think Carneros touched upon this earlier today. If there was things like that to waste money on, that would generate a lot more profit. But there's a limit to how much people actually care about what skin is on a ship when people are flying around fighting in potato mode.
Can I be fair though and say that the TNCT skins are like 1,000 times better than ours? They're a lot shinier, they're a lot prettier, and I resent the fact that they have better skins than us with a smaller company and a smaller budget. I'm assuming it's a smaller budget, and it's maybe not.
And I'm just more focused on the fact that because of the things that Carneros pointed out, I'm again going to refer back to that you have overpriced vanity assets and you don't have a useful place to put the vanity, and there's no cost for things that should have a cost. You should have a Plex cost to put your Alliance skin in. I'd be perfectly fine with that. It should be considerable because that's a vanity that counts, right? That's something that could be a group effort. I wouldn't see a problem with that costing in the realm of 25 Plex or 50 Plex to get your Alliance logo in there. Same if you wanted Alliance skins. Put some proper syncs in there. Put something that actually motivates people to put money in the hands of CCP, and let's get the brand unification. Let's get the clothing. Let's get something to spend the money on so the art department is actually a positive revenue stream.
Well, we don't know that it's negative, but I wanted to go back.
No, but it could be bigger. That's my argument. It could be a lot bigger.
Yeah, you'd have to look at the numbers. Put it out, because I'm putting my businessman and IT hat on here, right? I'm not talking about the stuff as a player, right? There's something that Marcia said earlier, right? Having the focus groups put these proposals together, right? Now, understand, no matter how good your focus groups are, CCP is going to review these just as if they had created themselves and possibly rewrite them. So you have to be careful how you do that. And as a company, you're going to look at a volunteer organization as something that's temporary and may fall apart anyway. So be careful saying that those are viable and that they would get the majority of the people behind them. The only people that get behind them are the people who are interested in that particular aspect.
In terms of aspects, though, like if you were to go through every subforum of EVE, and you've got the big ones being null sec, low sec, market discussions, what else? People who want to do Incarna long term. You could actually pull in groups of people into those. It's who would manage it, how, and how would it be structured? What's their purpose? Do they submit a written report every now and then? But it would probably gather up people who are committed enough to write at length, and it would cut down on some of the screaming on Reddit. Like the people on Reddit can just scream into the wind.
You wouldn't cut down on that.
No, well, no, but it would,
not necessarily.
No, but as a company,
it'd get the people who are actually committed to finding an answer engaged. The only danger with that would be that because they would be voluntary, that they would do it, and like the CSM, they would burn out because they'd do it, and it is literally screeching into the wind.
Well, yeah, I mean,
keep
that's
saying
the whole thing.
That the only thing you need to do to get Incarna working is rip out the captain's quarters, remake it in the Unreal Engine, allow players to have hands-on on a mod so they can do all their creative stuff outside of the client, and the creativity would be massive, and it would be free, and it would be all under the brand of CCP, because this creativity already exists. Clear Skies proved that beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Be careful with modding code that is server-side based on the decisioning. It's not as easy as you think.
I'm just saying that if you had access to the assets, you've already seen this by someone like Tiamba, right? He's been doing massive work for having fun with the Eve assets as they are. Imagine what would happen if the players had assets like the Unreal Engine, the skins for all the things, and the avatars as they already are, could save and even submit new ideas and new content to CCP directly. That's free development hours right there.
Well, not exactly, because you still have to now repurpose staff to review, decide, deploy, right? So from a business perspective, it's not as easy as, hey, you got these volunteers out here doing all this work.
Well, it works perfectly fine in E2 too.
Again, you have to make sure that it fits within their business model and what they're trying to do, right? Talking just as a business guy, right? I mean, what I look at the budgets, I do budgets, I figure this stuff out, and I got to keep people busy. And if I can't keep them busy, I got to get rid of them. And if I have too much work, I got to go yell at somebody because, hey, you're sending too much stuff my way. And by the way, if this is your number one priority this week, your number one priority from last week that's still in process is going to be delayed, right? These are the things that CCP has to fight.
Yeah, but CCP doesn't make Rooks and Kings videos. They don't make This Is Eve, the recent one from INN.
Yeah, I know.
They're not making that content, right? That's players making it. That's added value for nothing. And this is what would be possible if they gave these tools to the players so they had the ability to take part in the creative process. This is about fanfic, and fanfic is really huge on the internet these days. The creative power of the mass is huge.
How do other companies actually manage that player side creativity? I mean, how does that actually get embraced by other MMOs? Like, I don't play too many other MMOs, to be honest, so I really can't speak of that.
Well, it's a whole subsection of many other games like Skyrim mods and things like that, and it's not really needing any enforcement of any kind, except when someone is going over the top and maybe trying to make money on it, or if they're doing something very inappropriate, very obviously out there.
Yeah, it seems wasted.
I wanted to hit one other point that you picked up earlier, Caleb. The Alliance logo review, right? We need to understand their process, but I'm pretty sure that CCP's process goes through some sort of, does this look like anybody else's logo, even in real industry? And they try to keep that copyright out of there. So if they're designating actual man hours to this, right, I don't necessarily know that they could streamline that process. And that person is probably doing that job part-time in between all their other number one priorities that they have in IT, right? It's probably what's happening. I've been around IT and corporate business long enough that when you can read the tea leaves about what they're doing, you've been through it before, you've seen it before, right? Same thing with the Moongoo refining, right? I 100% guarantee you there was a cost-based analysis to making those rocks just mineable rather than a completely other mechanic, right? Costs more money to write a new mechanic. Hey, it's cheap, just funnel it through mining, right? That's what they're doing, and they are in maintenance mode, like Dirk says, very clearly.
Well, and when I say maintenance mode, I don't mean just leaving it kind of as is and making sure that the stuff that exists already works, right? But I don't necessarily know that it's in, let's invest a lot of our resources into a big project that will expand the game.
Yeah, I think I agree. And I think we should see a whole lot more marketing out of CCP.
No, I think the sad thing is that after 2011, and it was the Summer of Rage, was real, and they did make a massive U-turn, and then they recommitted to flying in space. They made big statements about it. They put a roadmap up. They've broken the roadmap, and it's gone on for too long. and they've broken a lot of things in between. They're breaking faith with the older players who didn't rage quit through Summer of Rage. So now they're at a point where they're like, right, it's all starting again, and it's over little things snowballing, and it's petty stuff that we don't really have an issue with, but your communication after all these years is still quite poor. And yeah, this sensation that you're spending money on other products like Spark and Valk that are nothing to do with us, that we can't even play. Like, we've been playing E for 10 years. We should get free access to any game they issue, and they're ring-fence dust. That was a slap in the face at the time. So now people are like, well, yeah, you are milking us. And yeah, it does feel like maintenance mode. And yeah, these changes are taking way too long.
I think it's more like you're spending our money on making toys for yourself,
for your
and
vanity,
new people that we can't play.
Yeah,
that was actually true back in the 2011 timeframe. I think it's less so. I'm not saying that some of the cash flow from EVE Online, isn't going into some of that stuff, but they also did get a pretty chunky investment that I believe was directed at the VR side of the business.
No, I'd agree with that, Dirk, and I'd say the VR side is actually turning a profit, which people don't realise. But
and that's cool. It's just that why are they not opening it up to us?
Yeah, we can't play it. So what the fuck has it got to do with us? You've just taken our money.
Why can't you play it?
Because why should we?
Is too high.
It's not integrated.
It's a platform that costs a fucking fortune, and there is no alternative. It's not like they said, okay, let's make a normal PC version of, say, Valkyrie, where that doesn't require the VR set, and just tweak it a little bit. That shouldn't be that hard. Then you suddenly have the entire player base of EVE playing that game as well. You could even.
That was one of the problems. That was one of the problems with Dust, and I think it's why they went the console route. Was they weren't looking to cannibalize their existing player base from here. They were trying to create another player base out there that was going to have its tie-in and interaction with the EVE that people were already playing.
Instead, the tourniquet feeding on the EVE player base to pay for those things, right? Because right now, what I'm seeing is not growth, right? There's no growth in EVE. What there is cannibalizing the player base to plex more, to multi-box more, to find workarounds, and it's the same people playing. There's hardly any new players coming in. It's very small numbers.
And also that failure with, and I'm sorry, but I think now it needs to be called that the Alpha Clone launch was a failure because they didn't return those players, and that's questionable. Like, why the hell did you launch it out and then allow it to fail that badly?
Because it doesn't.
How did it actually fail?
So the retention is still bad. So CCP Ghost might have a lot of good ideas. It's just why is so little of the concepts and the route to the game not discussed with the existing player base, because they're the only ones that really know what the route to the game is.
What the heck is in that bucket that you put in your hand in?
I thought it was popcorn.
That was another point actually as well. Like, new player experience, that could be designed so well by new player groups like EVE Uni, Karma Fleet, Brave Newbies. If you've got all of those, they're senior people into a room and said, designers, a new player experience, they could probably do it because they speak to new players every day. And instead of doing that, they launched Alpha Clones. They didn't advertise it properly. Then they did put out like a new NPE, which was not that good. And this isn't an insult to Ghost, but the development on it is too fucking slow. It's taking too long.
And then I'm going to be a little bit controversial, right? At FanFest, one of the things he said is he wanted to know about markets and economy stuff and how to open those doors up to new players. And I have not seen him in any of the market-related forums or anything like that. He's not contacted any of the people.
I blame for that? I blame the fact that he talked to you and then just went, "Oh my God."
Most likely, it's just that if you want new players to be able to come into the market and play, there's a few things that actually needs to be fixed before that becomes easy. Because right now, it's just a high-frequency trading competition game because the actual service-based business models do not work because there is no motivation to do so. Everything is centralized around Jita. Everything is centralized around internal markets in people's own structures. There is no motivation to trade, and then you have infinite faucets, so there is no margins to trade on.
I just want to go back to a comment that was made before about whatever money anybody thinks is being diverted from potential resources that could be dedicated to EVE Online and is going off into these other areas. Okay, in the absence of these other areas like VR and Spark and whatever else they're working on, Black Box, someplace that we don't even know about, maybe. Okay. Do we think that they would have used those resources here, or do you think that they would have taken it out as profits? Because just because those things exist does not mean that that money would have been put back. That extra money would have been put back into EVE Online development.
It's in savings right now, right? That's what the numbers are saying. They have a savings account of about $100 million.
Because their investors want return on investment. They, and if they don't think that dropping an extra dollar into EVE Online is going to generate more money than that,
I think what bothers me is the fact that they don't. I know that they're looking for new markets, and that's good. But what bothers me is that they do not take advantage of the existing player base for cross-pollinating and adding basically free marketing and free promotional stuff for the other brands. It's starting a little bit with groups like EVE that's doing a lot of Valkyrie stuff as well. But that's just not enough. And the fact that you have this platform that's so unattainable and they haven't iterated on anything else. They've not made a small standalone PI, which is the most failed thing in EVE ever, which is why it's so fucking expensive, because no one wants to do it, right? They've not iterated on that. That should be very, very simple to iterate on. I'm not asking for high glossy stuff. I'm just saying, do something like what Fallout did with Fallout Shelter. A simple thing, a simple mini game that you could actually access and play that's fun.
I'm going to go on a limb here and say, has CCP itself kind of run out of creative juices? Like, have they hit the wall?
No. If you look at what they've rolled out with the VR and stuff, they've put on their big breaches again, right? This is very much like they were doing back in 2008-9 when they talked about World of Darkness. The fact that they then bought a company that specialized in doing pen and paper stuff and writing law stuff, and they used that IP for making a game instead of making use of the existing brain power.
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt, and I'm going to completely agree with Rodin, because I do think they have run out of creative juices, and I think they are battle weary.
But none of the things that you're seeing seems to point to creative juices running dry. It's just that they are mismanaged and they're not interacting with each other.
So when I look at them from a pure IT analysis standpoint, that I look at them through that lens every day when I see a release, it seems like they are chasing the shiny little things. They got shiny little thing syndrome. They are darting here and there, and they are not staying the course on the real deliverable. Their priorities change by the week or by the month.
Yep.
And that is why you don't see the development that you need.
I think you're perfectly right. It's very much squirrel based, and they don't really keep up with one thing at a time. I think there's a lot of things that are vestigial things in EVE that hasn't been finished or iterated on. And of course, it's very difficult to do so when you're running something as complicated as a sandbox. But some things that you need to tweak and finish, or at least integrate properly into the gameplay, so it doesn't become a cancerous tumor in the system, right? And I think personally, PI is the thing for me that really is a cancer, because it's then tied into the rest of the ecosystem, except it's only people with tolerance for repetitive stress syndrome and extreme autistic spectrum personalities that can even tolerate doing that for 5 minutes.
They're doing skill point farms.
Oh yeah, that's right. They started doing zombie stuff.
This is a fair point, because this is what was said about POS management back in the day, that it was killing people out of the game who are really committed, and especially if you're in like an nullsec alliance and you had people doing POS logistics, they were the first to sort of drop dead, basically, of exhaustion. So imagine doing this on a wider scale with individual players, with PI, and leaving it for the amount of time they had. And how insulting is that for us as players, for them to be off tossing it off, showing off their VR presentations at Eve meets? We're like, right, okay, it's fine for you as a company to develop new products, but don't take the piss. Don't ram it down our throats, because we can't play it unless you give us a free headset or a free console. We can't play it because you've built it like that. So you're like pouncing about, taking our money.
Feels very much like the PS4.
You're leaving people. Leaving people
feels
to play
like
a shit game.
PlayStation exclusive problem with Dust, right? It's like, exactly the same thing. It's just a price gorge instead this time.
They don't understand the reaction from the players. They're literally like, they're reading comments, but they have no empathy, and they don't realise how badly it comes across.
I mean, you have a technology that requires, you have a game that requires a new technology. I mean, you have to say that they're leaving us out.
Putting a shooter on a console when your player base is the most highbrow PC master race players in the world, that just feels like such a retarded thing to do.
Well,
because
a lot of us
all the high-end fucking players in first-person shooters play on PC master race.
A lot of us thought at the time that it was a mistake for them as a company to not, have both PC and console. Okay. However, like I said before, one of the arguments was they weren't looking to cannibalize this particular audience.
But it's not cannibalizing.
They were going in.
They would also potentially get cross-pollination to existing FPS players in the PC realm. Why are they focusing on the stupidity of consoles? And it's the same with VR. I like the concept of VR. I think it's amazing. And Spark is definitely something that I will praise, because that looks like such a novel thing. But the Gunjack and the Valkyrie thing, that they couldn't actually make something similar on a normal PC, seems stupid. And that they didn't finish Legion, or at least get their timetables right so they could give us access to Nova on server closing. I just don't understand it. I feel like not only, well, I know CCP has been cheated because they got cheated by Sony, right? The fact that they got the exclusivity deal in the middle of the life of the PS3. So they were basically forced to port over to PS4, which they didn't opt in on, and then they lost a lot of the player base. So they've just been making bad choice after bad choice. They should dedicate themselves to the PC master race, and that should be their core audience. Everything else is just bonus. So if they can get on other platforms as well, fine, but make the core audience the ones that are already playing EVE, the ones that are actually dedicated for more than a decade to their brand. That's the argument.
Well, that, and maybe they just have to nut up and just like hire more people to work for them. I mean, that's just me. They seem really stretched out for devs, like really, really badly.
It doesn't help that they live in Iceland.
Well, I think their devs are stressed out because they're poorly managed, to be honest with you.
Really? Wow. Quite a claim. Shit.
I mean, I've seen it enough. I mean, I've been in the industry since 1991, right? I've watched IT develop. These guys, the way they're reacting, they are stressed out from some reason, and it isn't necessarily the players.
Do you feel any sympathy for like Fozzy, Larrikin, and the various others that have actually up sticks?
You can say Quant.
And no, not Quant, because he lives there. But I mean, like Fozzy, Larrikin, even Falcon, who moved. They actually dropped their lives and moved to Iceland, which is expensive. They're not getting paid that well, supposedly, and they're sat there weathering the storm, but actually, like, they're as much victims as we are, because they're employees committed to a game that they love, but they're not getting any traction because they're not getting the money they need to run the business. And there's been no expansion in staff since that big cull, not a big one, because it's all been rediverted to other projects. So their frustration's got to be pretty high.
Well,
and they feel, to me, it feels like CCP are very bad at making money. I know that they've made money on VR and that Eve is just chugging away. But to me, it feels like they're not very good at figuring out how to expand their revenue streams and figure out how to product develop.
Man, I tell you, yeah, I sometimes sound angry when I rant on some of these issues, but man, you guys are really, kind of downer on CCP. Look,
I think it's Hilmar, actually. I don't think it is directed at Siegel or senior management in CCP. It's directed at Hilmar because these other projects, he's CCP lead for the group, and VR feels like a vanity project for him, and he's done this 3 times now. He's done it with Dust, he's done it with Valk. Gunjack was a moderate success, but he's going to keep pushing with it. And it's like, how much control do the actual developers that we talk to day to day have over that? If he's going down the wrong route, they can't stop him. The players can't.
I don't know that these things are necessarily vanity projects. I think that they are trying to diversify a company that is expected to live long after any one of their, individual products, right? If you're a one-trick pony, you're going to die. I mean, CCP is not EVE Online. EVE Online is a product. CCP is a company that is designed to live after that. And they need to have, other sources of a potential future.
And of course, that's a very, very good and nice ambition to have, except that they keep mismanaging exactly that thing because they have been living off of only EVE Online since like forever because the other projects necessarily don't make it. And I blame the fact that they don't integrate them in a way that makes sense. That means they are not getting the nurture that their extremely dedicated player base and developers have.
I will argue that a lot of their other projects have failed because they suffer the shiny thing syndrome. They retasked all the devs off Darkness back to EVE Online to fix some huge things, right? And they doomed the project when they did that, and they know that.
Well, you read the articles in The Guardian about the bicycle tyre walking away sound that the dev made to somebody, make it more psh. That was just ridiculous. And the mismanagement of the Atlanta office, who actually did roll out viable CQ in half the time that the Icelandic office did. And to be honest, it feels like I've seen Hilmar, I keep studying him, and he does come across as really arrogant and vain. He wants to prove himself in the gaming world, and it doesn't help that there's an old developer who was part of the old was it Ragnar? I forget his name, who keeps trying to lay claim to the old IP despite being fired and selling his stock. He pops up every now and then, and there's a bit of drama about that because he was not invited to their 10-year anniversary, blah blah blah. And it's like, is Hilmar trying to strike out on his own and make CCP viable in a new arena? Is that what he is looking for at the expense of EVE players and EVE developers?
Well, I take argue with saying at the expense, right? Because I agree with what Dirk's saying. This is a product, and it has a limited lifetime no matter what you're going to say, right? And it's a game we play, and it's going to go away someday. And they need to have another product. And yes, they've failed at many products. And many companies fail with many products, right? I mean, it's just the way it is.
Yeah. Well, Akula here says, EVE has great potential as future revenue goes. It seems silly not to maximize that potential. I agree there. The question you have to ask, and that they have to ask themselves, right, is, but the growth potential. People don't just want a cash cow that does nothing but spin off and it's the same yield year after year. If they can get a better return someplace else, they have got investors, and those investors want to make money.
But you can't leave the shinies hanging and dangling off the side of the core business. That seems weird. That someone said, well, maybe CCP is considering selling off the VR. Well, they actually could, but is that a good thing? Shouldn't be an integrated part in the brand and in the IP. The fact that they took Project Arena that was actually a New Eden IP, and then suddenly wrote it out of the New Eden lore. So what? So they can sell it? Is that the intention, that they want it disconnected?
If that's the better choice for return on your investment.
And of course, that makes perfect sense. But if you're building on the IP, then you should integrate it into the IP. You don't want it hanging so you can potentially sell it off, because you can't really sell it off if it holds aspects of the old IP. If Dust takes place, integrate it into Eve. You can't sell it to someone else. That's the whole point, right? And or even license it out or something like that, or chamber it with things like the thing that Carneros is in with all those old MMOs that have gone to that retirement home. This is not a good business model. You need to keep it in one body and grow that in a healthy way.
Well, I think one of the things that CCP has failed at with Eve is they don't keep the marketing fresh, right? So I think they're pissing off enough of the player base. You have player base that is getting older and giving up games, right? And you're not bringing in new people. I think they thought Alpha would, but it's not going to the way they want it to do it. And, Dirk, you say we beat on CCP here. We're pretty down on them. I don't think anybody's saying anything here that they don't want CCP to change, right? But I do think it begins at Seagull. I absolutely think she's part of this and part of the problem, but you guys can try and convince me otherwise.
Well, I think she's part of the solution. And I've thought that since she actually took over. And this is not about beating on CCP. I love what they do, and I think they're the only game developer that makes something that I even remotely want to play, because everything else is so boring and easy mode and Xerox copies with new skins of everything that we've seen for the past 20 years. It's not exciting. It doesn't interest me. Adding a few new tweaks and novelty gimmicks doesn't really do it for me. This is the only game that I can play right now. I know that I'm about to go and play a little bit of the Secret World version 2.0, which is most likely going to disappoint me, because
blasphemy.
The point is that it's an extremely good game, but it's got so many flaws as well. So I can sit there and go, well, you've made a single player game into an MMO and you've not put any MMO aspects in it. So why have you made it MMO? And it's the opposite with Eve, right? You've made this massive sandbox, and then you don't leave enough room for it to actually grow into the extremely complicated world that it could be. You use the assets of Atlanta and the World of Darkness crew to try and make computer games instead of making them make pen and paper lore-based games for Eve, which is something that everyone has wanted since 2004, when they started the first small focus groups, or whatever you want to call it, of people that wanted to play pen and paper Eve. And that didn't come when they bought World of Darkness. That's just stupid. That's exactly what they could have brought out, right? That's a whole new branch. And especially with the empty nesters and all these things, they are not taking advantage of their IP in the way that they could.
God, I'm having like this deja vu, and I'm trying to remember when it was back to, 2013, 2014, where there was a lot of talk about CCP as a company, and whether or not they had enough developers. It may have been after the firings or layoffs and stuff that happened. But yeah, it's like a real deja vu from that perspective, because this literal same conversation happened, back then about, where they're using their money and how it's taking away from Eve. And, there's just no proof that it ever would have been put into Eve, even if those other projects or other ideas or whatever, didn't even exist.
I think that's a good place to comment on the fact that that's maybe exactly what this is. It's the summer of deja vu.
Yeah,
could be.
Yeah, but you notice that people are trying to minimize it now and saying, actually, it's not, because things were a lot worse then. But I think it was worse. It was a perfect storm. It was in the financial crisis.
It was mismanagement of assets, and in a way that's even worse than today. So yes, it was worse.
There's a level of cynicism now because the players that stayed, that didn't quit during Summer of Rage, that are long-term players, have seen it before. And so they're not at the front screaming on Reddit, but they're kind of seeing it and saying, actually, this is quite bad and we're not happy and we're not going to do a protest, but we're not happy.
Which part is quite bad? The actual stuff recently, or
I'd say
foundational issues?
This could be worse long term, because if it gets hold and serious long term players who weathered the Summer of Rage and have been around since, and they become too disheartened, they'll quit over a slower period. It won't be 27,000 in a week, but they'll just stop engaging because they'll just give up. And that's what it feels like to me. So, like, everybody seems to be trying to downplay it and say, it's not Summer of Rage, things have improved since then. But actually, the reality is still the same. Like, communication has improved, but they're still not listening. Development is not going where we want it to. People are still not being retained as new players. Marketing's bad. You're still spending money on other games and flouncing about at like conferences that are nothing to do with EVE, promoting products that we've paid for. Bottom line, we've paid for those, and we can't even play them. That's exactly the same as Dust was with VR.
I think I'm going to characterize my assessment of CCP this way. They are 50%. 50% of their problems are they can't message properly, and they don't control the devs and do the message in a professional way that avoids the devs being attacked. Okay. That's 50% of their problem. Okay. And about 40% of the rest of their problem is they can't stay focused on moving the ball forward. Okay. And the other 10% is because somebody takes comments personally. They got to start remembering that they're a company and not a person. And when they react to their customers, treat their customers as if they're people, but react in a way that is not as if you're a person, if that makes sense, right? Don't be so thin-skinned when you respond to your customers.
Yeah, right? Indeed. I think most of what you just said, I totally agree with. There's just one little thing that, as an American, I thought you believed that companies were people too.
No, that's just a taxable designation. That's a federal government thing. I mean, I believe CCP, I don't give a shit where you spend your money. If you're investing it in future technologies that I might like or might keep you viable as a company, great. Because when those things take off, picture the day when all this VR shit that they're doing, okay, becomes so mainstream that when you're sitting in your Dread or your Titan or your Frigate, you're not looking at your screen anymore. You're just swiveling your head around on the battlefield. Now tell me that wouldn't be freaking cool.
Oh yeah, we're all looking forward to it, but we need to make it a viable thing. It's just like I pretty much remember that mobile phones were very big suitcase-sized things that you put in your car, and they cost a small fortune. Now it's something that everyone's got in their pocket, and I think it's going to be the same with VR and augmented reality. But I think we're still at least 2-3 years out before it becomes normal and something that people can pay for, and especially the player base that EVE has. I know there's a lot of empty nesters and older players, and generationally they might have a lot of available money. But is it money they want to spend on that? That's my question.
Yeah. I think CCP needs to take a step back, start a real marketing program. You know, how cool would it be to sit in the movie theater and actually see a real EVE commercial, right? And by the way, no one, I just did the OK symbol like Trump. That's just fucking terrible. Okay. No one has a game with the scope and the breadth and the ginormousness of meeting people that EVE has. No one. They need to just take that out there and just market the hell out of it.
Exactly. And that's a perfect place to round off on a positive note that this brand does have huge potential, and it still does, and the community is pretty much still behind it, even though we are a little bit disgruntled and pissed.
Yeah, I totally agree. We'll get there.
Any last things, comments, or shout outs?
I got a whole lot of nothing.
Everyone's got a whole lot of nothing. Everyone knows who we should give shout outs to. So join us next week and next Saturday, same place, the same time. And until then, keep your eyes on Eve Guardian and, of course, all the other media. And I'm sure that you can find Dirk McGurk popping up somewhere in the near future.
Right? All right, well, thank you very much, guys.
He's like, what are those meerkats or whatever they are?
It's probably down the African savannah. All right, good to go. Well, thank you very much, guys. We'll see you again next week.